Hello and welcome to a draw with me video. This is the second video on my channel and I thought it would be nice to do a draw along with me for some sapphic fairies, some forest fairies. I thought that might be a nice draw with me beginner video for the channel. It's currently 8 a.m. while I'm doing this voiceover. My partner is currently doing a final and I thought I might girl boss and get this video done a little early. So here's my morning voice. So for me to get a sapphic fairy piece idea out of my head, I always use Pinterest for all of my inspiration. I've been trying to get into the habit of creating mood boards specifically for each piece. I kind of like it. I used to just put everything into one uncategorized board, but now that I'm using Pinterest as a tool for my small business, I've been trying to organize my ideas a little better, and I think that it has been really effective for me in organizing my ideas in a more cohesive way and allowing me to get pieces out quicker without becoming overwhelmed or distracted by the other inspiration things that I save. For this piece, I used a gel pen on Canson XL mixed media paper. I really wanted to color the piece using watercolors, but my frontal lobe totally turned off during the few hours that I was inking the piece itself, and I did not remember that gel pen is extremely not waterproof, no matter how many times I seal the paper and try to prep it for water. So I had to switch tracks around halfway through this video and decide on a new medium. So I ended up deciding to use colored pencils, and I think the end result still conveyed the same feel and ideas that I had wanted to communicate, which is a successful mistake, I would say. But yeah, this video is kind of a long one, so I just wanted to chat with you guys, maybe ramble a little bit about life and the art process while you guys watch some footage. Let me know what you guys think about this speed. Most of the clips are anywhere between 300 to 600% faster than real time. I'm a very slow artist, and I wanted to find a balance between up close real-time footage while also being able to show the entire process. I would love to show more real-time footage, but I don't think that the video would be short enough. As it is, the video is already about an hour long. So let me know what you guys think. Do you prefer to see footage at this speed if it means you get to see the whole piece? Or would you rather see much more slowed down footage, but only being able to see parts of the creation process? Just let me know. Right now, I'm getting the sketching phase out. I know I started the video with a rough sketch already fleshed out, and I mostly left that out because I didn't really want to start the video with my process of like floundering around with poses and deciding what I want to actually have the piece look like. So once I get a general idea out, I begin to go in with really messy sketches. I prefer that way of drawing. I have found that the mechanical pencil and erasers that I use really work well with my heavy-handed style. I'm usually able to erase things pretty cleanly, but if I can't, or if I want to make sure that I have a clean piece, I will always use a light box onto a new piece of paper, which is what I ended up doing today. But overall, I really prefer having a very heavy, messy sketching style that is super rough, super vague. I feel like that opens up a lot of interpretation and more freestyling when I actually do get to the line art. In the past, I've found that having very strict, exact guidelines to follow with the line art really takes out a lot of the life in the final piece. And in order to simulate a little bit more of that life and fluidity and 3D fullness that sketching can show, I'll keep it a little vague as I can without really losing the meaning of the piece. I think in that case it causes me to be more creative and problem solve a lot more when it comes to the actual line art, which actually encourages mistakes. I feel like that brings out a lot of life in the line art. And it's definitely a stylistic choice, but one that I think brings out a lot of life in my style. My main process for drawing these days is to create a very rough thumbnail in my sketchbook, usually practicing out elements of the piece or poses. In this case, I felt that the poses and ideas that I wanted to convey weren't too technically difficult for me, so I made maybe 1 or 2 small thumbnails to get the general shape of the piece down, and then I started out with the very light, not very fleshed out sketch that you saw at the beginning. I then go into a more heavy-handed, messy sketch, which is what I'm working on now. I think I spend a lot of time fleshing out details here, just carving out some ideas for the line art and the coloring, some things that might be fun to experiment with later on, as well as adding depth to the characters' bodies or the backgrounds itself to give it a little bit more life. So that's what I'm working on right now. Hair is usually something that I leave mostly up to interpretation in the line art phase, for better or for worse. I always feel like in hindsight, I wish that I had fleshed out the hair more often, like with this fairy that I'm working on right now. But in terms of the other fairy, I think I fleshed out the hair a little bit more, and I was happier with it. In other cases, with hairstyles that I'm more comfortable with, leaving it up to interpretation in the line art phase tends to be more fun than stressful. For this one, it was a little challenging, but I think it turned out really great. I think this is my favorite part of the piece, the little bumblebee with the dandelion. Throughout the piece, throughout the line art, coloring, and sketching, I really enjoyed working on this part the best. So yeah, while I keep sketching, I figured I could just ramble on about things and just see where that leads us. I'll have some music going if you want to draw along with me, maybe just listen or even watch the video. Any of that's fine. Let's just have a nice relaxing start to the day. Well, it's a start to the day for me. It's about 8:30 a.m. right now. Right now, it's finals week in December, for my partner at least. I'm not in school right now. I actually work a part-time job to pay bills while I work on my art shop, and my partner is in grad school finishing up his first semester of college here. He's currently doing a final right now as we speak, and I wanted to get on top of things and just film this voiceover while I had some time and while I had caffeine in my system to get it out of my system. I had originally intended on creating the entire piece just out of my sketchbook page. A lot of my drawings are made this way because I'm generally a very lazy person and I don't like to redraw, even though I'm essentially doing the same work and putting more burden on myself by having to erase later on. But this time I wanted to go all out for YouTube, and so I pulled out my light box. I think this is just like a crappy $50 light box that I got as a gift back in, early high school. Must have been 6 or 7 years ago at this point. Honestly, the light box doesn't even work unless the charger is like propped up at a specific angle. So it's kind of on its last legs, but I still love using this light box, and I think it's a great tool for artists who are able to have one in their space. Right now I'm lining with a Sharpie 0.7mm gel pen. These are my all-time favorite form of liner. I'll usually line my pieces using a gel pen or a Sharpie marker. Micron would have been a better choice in this situation just for the waterproofness, but I really enjoy the dark lines of the gel pen, as well as how easy it is to convey my line art style using this medium. And they're pretty cheap. I don't have to go to Michael's every time I run out of a Micron, and I find that these gel pens run out of ink way slower than a Micron does. So I just in general prefer to use these. They're a really cheap office supply. Name brand isn't really important for a gel pen. You can find any of these gel pens at like a dollar store, a surplus store, any major store. They're usually pretty cheap. In fact, I feel like besides ballpoint pens, they're usually ready to practically give them away to you. I know these Sharpie pens are a little on the more expensive side, but I can still get a pack of 3 to 4 pens for about $2 or $3 at my nearest store, which I find is a great deal for how long the ink lasts. And sorry for all of the blurring throughout this video and my hair strands wanting to be in the limelight. I kind of get tunnel vision when I'm drawing. I try to focus on the camera while I'm filming to make sure that I'm getting a good angle and not having my hands taking up 3/4 of the picture like they are right now. But unfortunately, I do get tunnel vision while I draw. I'm still not used to filming myself while drawing, even though I've been filming my art process for about 1.5 years now between Instagram and TikTok. But I do still get caught up in my own art, which I think is a good thing for an artist, but I can always find that balance so that I can share that process with you. That's my goal at the end of the day. I like how crisp the camera work is here, so congrats for that, Juliana. She did a great job. Oh, and never mind. Back to my face covering up the camera. That's okay. If you can't already tell, line art is by far my favorite part of the process. I always get a little sad when I do colored pieces because the line art never really shows through to the same degree as it does when it's just by itself. I think most of my time and effort goes into the line art phase, whether or not that line art will actually be a strong component of the piece later on. I always get caught up with this part of the piece and just have an absolute blast doing the line art. Most of my portfolio is comprised of ink-only pieces. It's just my favorite part of the process, and I think the majority of my style comes from the line art. But anyways, I'm feeling pretty tired right now. It's been kind of a weird schedule for the past month or so, getting my partner ready for finals, getting my YouTube channel ready to go. I published my first video last Friday, and it has been so much more successful than I could have asked for. I am just blown away by how much support I've received from friends, family, and even strangers over the past, maybe I think 3 days. And I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you so much for all of the support so far. It has been a bit of a lonely month. About a month ago, I had my Instagram account taken down, and that was kind of my main hub of communication with the art community that I had formed and developed over the year. And so it was just really heartwarming and impactful for me to see how much support I've still received even after being gone for so long. It really meant a lot to me, and I'm so excited for this new medium. I have so many ideas. I don't know really what to do with myself. I'm so incredibly excited for the next year. So thank you so much for all of this support. This is only the beginning. I'm so excited to keep moving forward on this. I dropped out of college about a year-ish ago, in September of 2021, and as somebody who spent my high school experience studying APs and getting ready for college, it has been kind of a ride experiencing more of an artist-focused life since dropping out. I originally intended on creating a career out of a biology degree in research, so that I could fuel my art hobby on the side and not have to worry about income. This was obviously based on a stereotype of the starving artist. I know every artist knows about this stereotype, which is not true. I think in the past year of dropping out and taking that leap, I have found that while it hasn't been easy to be a part-time artist, it has certainly been much more fulfilling than any biology degree could have made me feel. While I haven't been able to sustain my income off of this art, I have found that it is much easier to curate income using this field than I originally anticipated, which is a great thing to hear. And I stand by the belief that there's room for everybody at the table. This is a much more welcoming field with a lot less competition than biology in my experience, or college. And as somebody who is queer and neurodivergent, I have just found what feels like my calling with art in a way that STEM could not give me, I think. This isn't to discount any STEM majors or any artists who are still pursuing a STEM or otherwise non-art related degree in lifestyle. That was my original goal, and I feel like I could have had a very fulfilling life using that medium. As a matter of fact, my partner of 3.5 years is in STEM, and he's one of the most creative people I have met in my entire life. I never want to discredit the creativity in STEM fields. I think especially as a neurodivergent person, STEM is like art and creativity in that it fuels an art of the mind. So I never want to use my experience and detract from others with a different experience in STEM. This was just my experience, and I'm always happy to share a nuanced perspective. I grew up in a low-income household where education and opportunity was one of the few ways of escaping my circumstance, and I oriented my childhood education to try and escape the environment that I was born into. I don't think that I would have the discipline nor the experience that I have been able to apply for my business if I hadn't been that AP student working on a biology degree for my education. And so I'm always going to be grateful for the background that I have in STEM, science, academia, and primary education. At the same time, I think that maybe due to my own personality, my upbringing, and my focus on my career, I sort of developed an identity around me being a biology, STEM, straight A student, which is not a bad thing, but once I dropped out, I really struggled with that idea. I had formed my identity around being a biology researcher, somebody who studied, and I didn't have much else to go off of when I dropped out, so I felt pretty listless for a few months after I dropped out, and I believe I spent most of this year, 2022, figuring out who I was if I wasn't in college or in school, in high school, pursuing a degree, pursuing a STEM degree, pursuing research, any of that. I wondered who I was and who I was going to be, and what did it mean if I didn't know any of those answers. Usually if you're in high school or in college and you feel that college is your path, it's easy to put off the idea of your identity because you can kind of just put it away in your mind by saying that I know what my next steps are. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to find a 9-to-5. I'm going to do grad school. I'm going to do lab research. I'm going to graduate. you can kind of just use those as placebo identities for the foreseeable future so that you don't have to worry and stress about it. We have so much to stress about already that something so nebulous and vague as an identity is kind of difficult to unpack, especially when you have regular life to process, especially during the pandemic where I believe a lot of our identities were rooted up more than it usually is in the way of life. So when I dropped out, I wondered, what did I have? What was next? I'm grateful that I was able to find a job at my local library in the area. I've been working with libraries for about 4 or 5 years at this point, and it felt like a natural path for me after dropping out. At the time that I dropped out, I knew that I wanted to pursue art, but I also knew that I needed to find a way to stabilize my finances so that I could still pay my bills. Currently, I live with my partner. I've lived with him for over 2 years now, and throughout the pandemic, we have been sharing finances so that one or both of us could maintain being in school. So I was very grateful to be able to find a job relatively shortly after dropping out to be able to keep paying for my bills. But that didn't really solve the issue of my identity. It was a job for sure. It was a form of income, but it wasn't an identity, especially since I knew it wasn't going to be a career for me. I felt really out of place at this job. Most of my coworkers were middle-aged or old enough to be grandparents. Meanwhile, I was 20 and a college dropout. So I felt an issue with my identity, a lot of dissonance in my day-to-day life, and it was not a fun time. I really struggled with my purpose, what I should do, who I should be, and just struggling with how overwhelming it was to have that freedom after I had graduated. At the start of 2022, I began doing research into markets in the local areas, and I met a few friends in my town that I could talk to online to try and get information on like where I should get started. And throughout the course of winter and spring of 2022, I researched what I wanted in my brand and began fleshing out my goals, my core audience, and my morals for my brand. Spending my summer working markets and getting to meet other artists, especially other queer neurodivergent artists, I slowly began to feel a sense of identity and place, a sense of community, one that I had never felt before, especially in academia. I began to realize why I had felt so lost and confused, even when I was in high school and in college. I spent a lot of my time in school trying to relate to my neurotypical or more wealthy peers, and I felt ostracized every time. I never really tried to seek out any art groups. I guess I didn't see that as a valid form of identity for me, and because of that, I think I lost a lot of memories that I could have experienced in my childhood. Fortunately, throughout the summer of this year, I was able to create many of those memories that I still look back on, and I am just leaving this year feeling so grateful because I now feel a stronger sense of identity, purpose, and motivation. You know, it's not easy to post online and try and learn new mediums and software, but I've come to realize this year that art really is my sole purpose in life. I feel so fulfilled this year, even after so many setbacks, and it just motivates me to keep moving forward, especially feeling that sense of identity and community with other artists, feeling like my struggles growing up were not just my own, that I wasn't alone in the way that I felt, especially during the pandemic. It's such a profound relief that I'm sure many of us can relate to. So, regardless of the setbacks and struggles with learning new mediums and the struggles of sharing your art online, I am so grateful and happy for the future and for my past. The little bumblebee is back. I think it just came out so cute. I wish the coloring hadn't taken away some of these details that I had inked out, but we can appreciate it right now in the moment. Look at those little feet and that little heart. So cute. My favorite part of the piece. So I wanted to draw sapphic forest fairies for this piece. That was the idea, the main theme that I had set for myself, and I used mostly Pinterest references to try and curate a Alphonse Mucha Art Nouveau type feel for this piece. I wanted to emphasize more diversity in body type, and I still managed to give them pretty fake bodies, pretty fake hourglass bodies, but I tried to add a little bit of tum-tum in there, and I was really pleased with how these character designs came out. I wanted their dresses to be based sort of on these just flowing, comfortable garments that were loosely flower-based, and my partner mentioned that the hair for this fairy really reminded him of roses, which I did not see at first, but I really enjoyed his interpretation of the hair, and I wanted to emulate that later on in the coloring when I added some red highlights to the end of her hair. I'm usually pretty heavy-handed with line art, but I really wanted the end piece to be softer and less bold with the line art. Not really sure how well that idea was executed in this piece, but that's the whole journey of art for me, is to have ambitious ideas and fail with them or succeed with them and see where those failures or successes lead me in new paths. A lot of the times I think my art tends to come out of my hand rather than out of my mind, and it's kind of like I'm fighting with the paper itself. I kind of have this predisposed idea of what I want from the piece, but a lot of the times it seems like the piece has its own ideas about what it wants to be, and a lot of my journey as an artist is coming to accept that and just letting it be what it needs to be. When I let go and just let it form itself for me, let it create its own story, I'm more likely to enjoy the process and be so proud of the end result, and I think this is the case for this one. I wanted it to be more soft and less loud, but I think just letting it be bold, letting it be soft where it wants to be and loud where it needs to be was very rewarding. It was a very rewarding process for me, very cathartic piece. This was one of those pieces where I was just so excited to keep working on it that my hands were sore by the end of the day. I usually end up popping my pinky out, like you can see here, when my joints start getting too sore to keep working on the piece, but I just don't want to stop. I remember this piece took much longer than I originally anticipated. I wanted it to be a much more casual piece, but after 10 years of drawing, I should know by now that I'm a perfectionist, and I just really always want to go all out, just to really be flamboyant with every single piece that I make. And I think it paid off here. I think if I had tried to rush this piece a little more, that I would have been a lot less happy with the result, but just letting it take me down a path and allowing it to take as long as it needed to take to finish was a very rewarding practice and discipline for me. I had spent the past 2 or 3 weeks editing and re-editing the last video that I published, my sketchbook tour of the past 10 years of my art, and checking up on my dad, who had been in the hospital for about 3 weeks. So it was refreshing to just be able to use my pen and kind of turn my mind off and just let stuff come out of the paper. Art has always been a form of therapy for me before I wanted it to be a career. It was a way for me to cope with a chaotic household that I grew up in, and I think that therapeutic side of my relationship with art really came out in this piece. It was a very cathartic piece to work on, and I really enjoyed adding in the motifs that I chose to. I'm putting it out here for anybody who is ambiently listening to this and drawing along with me that I was just really proud of these shoes here. I wanted to give her kind of like a toadstool type shoe. Like, I had to ask myself, if these are fairies, what kind of technology do they have access to? I mean, do they have like factories where they make their shoes? Do they have like Louis Vuitton factories where they make their clothes and purses? Or do they make it themselves, like fashioning their own devices out of nature around them? Obviously, the latter idea is the more popular one in the media's depiction of fairies, so I wanted to go with that avenue. I thought it would be cool to have a fairy fashion a high heel out of a toadstool. Doesn't sound like a very long-lasting form of footwear, but it's a cute one at that. And I think that idea could have more articulations than the one that I had created. I would love to know what your interpretation of their footwear could be like. I mean, who wants to just have the basic flats that we see in the Disney Pixie Hollow interpretation of fairies? I think fairies also want to be classy and have high heels. I don't know. But I really liked how that shoe came out. Here I'm adding in kind of what I like to think of as like a mossy growth, kind of like a semi-background that's not really a background frame to the piece. I wanted it to be more abstract and sketchy, and I almost wish that I had articulated it a little better, but foliage is not my strong suit, but I'm still pretty pleased with how it came out. I wanted to give it those swirly, spiky branches and curling tree branches, moss, and small flowers that you would see in like a fairy type setting, and it ended up becoming much more abstract than I had originally intended, but I was still pretty pleased with the result. As I'm recording this and trying to come up with things to talk about out of my ass, I'm wondering, for you as the viewer, as the theoretical artist viewer, what is your favorite part of the process? Is it the sketching, the thumbnails, line art, coloring? Is it finishing up with details like highlights? I think for me, the line art and adding those little highlights with my jelly roll are the best parts of the piece. I think the most rewarding part of the process is getting to add my little signature at the end. It feels like varnishing a piece. I'm finishing it up, readying it to show the world, and I'm so excited to show them what I've been spending the past few days or weeks or months on. So what's your favorite part of the process? I would love to know. It shocks me when people say that it's coloring, because coloring is not my favorite part of the piece, but I know that a lot of people really don't like the line art and choose not to have line art in their pieces, especially if they're a digital artist. I think in my digital art, line art is kind of like the bane of my existence. I think that's kind of like a popular sentiment. I hate line art on digital art. It even though it's the main identity of my art style. So I've been grappling with that dissonance in my technique ever since I picked up an Apple Pencil in my Procreate. But just let me know what your favorite part of the process is. And I would love to know, in addition to that, what your favorite part of my process in this video was. Do you prefer watching me line aimlessly for half an hour? Did you like the sketching part, which took me about 5 to 10 minutes in this finalized rendered video? Or will you like the coloring process shortly up ahead? I would love to know. Now obviously these fairies are sapphic. That was the main theme of this piece. They're very gay, and I felt like their poses weren't conveying that hard enough. So I added in a nice lavender field, which I think really filled out the piece. And I think the lavender field is one of my favorite additions to the piece. It was a pretty last-minute decision. I think I had come up with the idea while thinking about the piece during a session of Zelda or something like that. Definitely not drawing or in the headspace of drawing, but just thinking about what else I could add to that piece before I colored it. What better way to articulate that than with a lavender field? Again, flowers are not really my forte, but I really enjoyed creating these lavender flowers? Is that what I would call it? Each flower? I really enjoyed creating that field for this piece. I think it added another level of identity to the characters. Anyways, I don't know who's watching this during their finals week, a winter break, a summer break, a random Tuesday, in 2022, 2023, another random foreign year, whether you're even a student or not, I don't know, but I hope life is going well. I know the past few years have been rough for everybody, regardless of your situation, and I hope this is a nice relaxing space to kind of forget about it a little bit, or maybe feel a little bit of catharsis with it. Anyways, we're finally into the coloring stage, about 40 minutes into this video. I skipped a little bit of the green background. At that point, I needed to take a break from filming so that I could be angry about the fact that I couldn't use watercolor for this. I was so excited to give it that watery 1900s Art Nouveau look, but instead, as all artists must do, I had to be flexible. I wanted to instead try to go for a pencil look. I didn't want to blend out the colors or the texture like I usually do. I wanted to emphasize the pencil texture of the colored pencils. I felt very inspired by Bao Tifam's recent colored pencil style and technique, where he really emphasizes that unique texture that only colored pencils have. I really wanted to emulate that. I thought it would be a good substitute for the watery look that I had originally planned. And speaking of Bao's style, I have had some exciting plans for my future videos, one of them being videos that practice emulating another style or another style aesthetic. The two that come to mind that I would love to do in the near future are Mucha and Elfgren, Klimt, Art Nouveau, Abstractionist, those types of artists and art styles. I'm really interested in seeing how it plays with my own rendering style and drawing style, but let me know what kind of drawings and art styles you would love to see from me. Over the next 2 months, as I get ready for my first convention in February, I wanted to create more fan art, maybe of fandoms like Zelda, and then other more trending kid fandoms like My Little Pony or Care Bears. I just think all of those would blend really well with my line art and coloring style. But of course, these would be made for YouTube, and I would be remiss if I didn't ask the people watching this video what types of drawing content they would love to see. Do you have any preference towards fan art? Do you prefer seeing original art? Are there any fandoms that you're interested in right now that you would love to see me emulate? Any specific characters? I know the next season of Demon Slayer is coming out next year, and I am so looking forward to that. I don't know if the third part of the recent JoJo season has come out already. We've only seen the first part on Netflix, and I would love to draw more JoJo art. Anything like that. I would love to know what you guys think. This part of the video gets a little bit more jarring compared to the line art. The way that I added in the colored pencil strokes were very jagged in my opinion, so when it's sped up to 600%, I'm really just like flashing my hand across the screen repetitively for minutes on end, and to me it gets to be a little jarring at some point. So let me know what you think about this portion of the video, whether you would rather see segments slowed down of the coloring, which might sacrifice seeing the entire process, or if you prefer seeing this larger segment of the coloring process. I think I left out a few clips here and there of my coloring process, but those were mostly in the case of me deciding not to use a specific color shortly after using it, or the dead space where I was picking out a color or being really indecisive with what choice I wanted for the color palette. Do you guys plan out the colors in your pieces? That's something that I really desperately need to start practicing more. I always find myself getting a little frustrated with at least one color choice in every piece because I just don't plan it out. I usually envision what I want before I start, like kind of like a rough idea. I knew I wanted the fairy to have blue wings with purple color coding, but that was pretty much all that I knew about the piece. And I really struggled when it came to the jewelry and the clothing. I couldn't decide on a color for her. And I think that planning out the piece beforehand would have been a quick way to solve that issue and speed up my overall drawing time. Do you guys plan out the coloring, or is that another thing that you also wish that you could implement more often? I see artists like Chris Hong who plan out every piece and it always ends up looking phenomenal, and I would love to practice that technique and discipline more often in my pieces. Sometimes I'll test out a color on a separate sheet of paper just to make sure it's the type of color or saturation or hue, tone, temperature that I'm looking for, but it's generally just vibe based creating these. And when it's like a single character or just a one-off sketch of a character, I don't really need to plan out the color scheme, especially if it's a character that already has colors assigned to them. But in the case of this piece, where the general color scheme was forest and green type themes with a warmer feel, I feel that planning out the colors could have benefited me in the long run. Here I'm really struggling to figure out which color I want, so I kind of went over it a little bit with pink, and then I went back over it with greens and ultimately decided on a yellow tone for the clothing, which I think in hindsight was a good choice. But to be a little more critical of this character's color choice, I wish that I had picked warmer tones rather than cooler tones to match that forest theme that I had set for myself. I think the cool purples and blues had kind of detracted a little bit from that warm summer theme. And I can't let a single scene of this bumblebee go by without addressing it. It is just so cute, and I was so happy with how the colors came out. I think it perfectly blended in with the overall theme of the piece. It's still my favorite part of the piece. Around this point in coloring the piece, I started to get pretty frustrated, and I think you can tell that I started to rush a little bit more with the coloring. At this point, it was getting pretty late on a Saturday. I was already a few days behind schedule in finishing up this piece, and when I sit down and try and work on art or any project really, my ADHD brain kind of kicks in and wants me to have it all done in one sitting. I noticed that with editing, with drawing, with my school projects, with work, pretty much any project that I set myself to, I really prefer to get it done in one sitting. Obviously, for something like an art piece or editing, it is work that physically cannot be done in one sitting, and this leads me to feeling more burned out and frustrated because I kind of expect it to be done in one sitting, and even though the time that this amount of quality takes is far more than one sitting, I still kind of subconsciously expect myself to get it all done at once and feel a little disappointed when I don't. I stayed up editing this video while my partner was at a D&D session last night, and yet again I felt pretty frustrated with myself for taking longer than the 2 or 3 hours it took for me to edit the video. One, because the video ended up being over twice as long as I expected. I wanted this video truly to be 20 to 30 minutes long, but I also wanted it to have more of an up-close, slowed-down feel, and I tried to find a balance between those two, showing the entire process and showing it up close, and I hope I struck that balance, but I found myself getting frustrated at my own capacity to finish this in one sitting, even though I don't think any human being would be able to reasonably edit 8 to 10 hours of footage in one 3-hour sitting. I think this might be part of the reason why I tend to rush coloring a lot specifically. With liner, I feel that I can always tangibly see how much longer I have to go in the piece, and it's easier for me to find a good stopping place with liner. Like, I finished lining one character, or I finished lining the foreground, and it's an easy way for me to say that I'm done for the day and I can pick up again tomorrow. But with coloring, I have less of that foresight, maybe due to experience, maybe due to the nature of that medium, but I'm always struggling to find a good stopping place. It's nice to stop after putting down base colors or so on and so forth, but for me it's a lot more vague of transition markers, for lack of a better word. It's harder for me to say that I have officially finished this stage of this part of the process and I'm ready to be done for the day and work again on it tomorrow or another day. I don't know if this is a common struggle, but it's something that I've constantly struggled with since delving into art itself 10 years ago, and I think that is a huge motivator in why coloring is not my favorite part of the process, at least traditionally. Oh yay, I finished the coloring, I did it! And I'm finally adding in the highlights with the jelly roll. This is like my favorite part of the piece. I remember being an artist in high school and always wanting a jelly roll. I had no idea how artists got that clean white look in their highlights, and I naively assumed that they colored and inked around those areas. So as a younger artist, I was constantly trying to build in the highlights as I inked or colored, which is so much more time consuming than just adding them afterwards. And when I found out that you could get a white marker like a jelly roll or a whiteout marker for $1 or $2 at any store, it blew my mind. So it is such an exciting part of the process because it feels like one of those supplies that I use that is like, I'm an artist. Like, yeah, I am an artist. I don't know if that's just me. It makes my art feel that much more elevated and professional. I added this blended out white highlight to the edges of the wings because I wanted to give it more of a transparent, glimmery look. What I like to do is build up the white and then smudge out the edges with my finger, which is extremely effective with this jelly roll. One of my biggest complaints in using Jelly Roll specifically is how difficult it can be to get the ink to come out sometimes. I don't know if that's because of the texture of the paper or the texture of the colored pencils or just the nature of Jelly Roll itself, but as the piece was becoming finished with this Jelly Roll, I noticed that it was difficult to get the ink out more and more commonly throughout the rest of the piece. In other pieces, I enjoy using acrylic white paint to give it that highlight. When it comes to super small details like this, I think a white pen is ultimately the best choice. But if I'm using a bigger piece that is on a bigger piece of paper and I want to add in like a galaxy star background, I love using acrylic white paint because you can control the opacity of those pens without having to add fingerprint marks to the piece, and the paint goes on a lot quicker in my experience. In this case, the Jelly Roll was just fine, and I loved adding these colorful sparkles that was inspired by one of the Pinterest inspiration pieces that I had for the piece. Recently, I have become addicted to adding star highlights to popular highlight areas like shoulders, elbows, knees, cheeks. I think it adds more of a stylistic interpretation of highlights than just a circle or otherwise added highlights. I think the heart adds a lot more character and style, and I really enjoy that part of my process. So as I'm finishing up this piece, I wanted to be a little selfish and talk a little bit about my plans for the near future, online or in person with art, and just ramble about that for a little bit. I have my first solo gallery in January, which I'm so excited for. I've been working on a Dreamcore inspired piece of self-reflection for it for about 6 months now. Every time I work on that piece, it is against my will, but I think I will be really happy with the final product when I do finally finish it. Every week I expect myself to have it done, and every week I manage to not finish it somehow. But I do have a meeting with the gallery about my exhibit this week, so I'm hoping to really finish it up by this or next week. I'll have about 5 or 6 pieces planned for that exhibit, and I would love to make kind of like a studio vlog type video about the installation process and my experience with the opening reception. So if you guys would like to see that footage or like a video surrounding that topic, I would love to make a video about it. I think I might make a video about it anyways, but I might try to incorporate it into a different topic that is more applicable to the person watching it. I've been featured in a couple of galleries this year, mostly casual ones surrounding a theme. I think my first gallery ever was this May on a topic titled Healing Through Art, and I was also featured in a couple of more casual anime and cartoon inspired galleries, which have been such a joy and an honor to be a part of. But this will be my first time having my own exhibit around my own thesis, and I am just so thrilled to have that opportunity. My gallery is going to be around the topic of changes and growth. All of the pieces will, in some way or another, reflect a change or a sign of maturity in my life throughout moving out of my house, starting college, dropping out of college, ideas surrounding political ideas in the pandemic, all sorts of themes like that. And so I'm just really excited for that gallery, and that's my most recent upcoming opportunity that I'm looking forward to in the new year. I will also be attending my very first anime convention in February. That's the earliest confirmed date that I have. It will be Anime Crossroads, and I'm so excited. I've been mostly sticking to smaller markets and artist related meetups, which have been an awesome journey for me, but I'm excited to really see the anime community and see how they like my art. Overall, between a gallery, conventions, and YouTube, there's a lot to look forward to next year, and I'm so excited for what lies ahead. I hope you enjoyed this piece, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.